So maybe one more minute, and then, Kristof, the floor will be yours. Whatever we can call the floor in this format.
Alexander, what's the problem?
Okay, shall we switch to the second part? I think we're ready, Kristof.
Okay. Thank you, Alexander. Welcome, everybody. It's I'm sorry I was a bit late. I had a lot of practical problems to find a place where I have internet, and so on. It was a bit difficult, but I'm here. And thank you all also for this great organization, and also for the participation in the form of all these great Padlets. I wanted to present to you, well, the time to discuss a bit this list, because I think it's a very, well, maybe it could be an intriguing one to see if we have completed this to cover up critical thinking, and that entails the second part of this list. But I thought maybe it's nice because we are in interaction with each other now, to start with a small experiment of critical thinking, a short exercise in which we can share some results. And it's an exercise you can do with your own students. It's only 15 minutes. And it immediately, I think, evokes feelings of perplexity. It gets the attitude of the start of the inquiry attitude, I would say. In the same time, you get into problems in 15 minutes, and immediately there's something in a human being that wants to resolve these problems, and that you might call, even in pupils, the urge to do some inquiry, to get out of the problems. That's how most people start thinking. That most people don't read the manual of their washing machine, but they start thinking, how does the washing machine work as soon as it stops working, when they get into trouble. So one of the things I do with my students is to get them into trouble as fast as you can, and then it's up to them to solve these problems. And of course, philosophy is a tradition. It's full of problems. It's never resolved. Some of them got resolved, like the earth and the sun, and how do they relate to each other? Or how does our mouth function? How is it possible that our tongue speaks the words that I'm thinking about? There was a question of the 16th century or the 17th century that has been resolved by a lot of doctors, neurologists, and so on. But there are a lot of other problems still to be solved. For example, our problem of this conference, that is what is thinking and what is critical thinking. That's not so easy. So do you like this idea of starting with an experiment? First, 50 minutes, and then we discuss the results a bit, and then we link it to the list. Is somebody against this proposal? Then we do something else. No? Okay. I saw that you don't work in workout or in breakout groups. That's right, Alexander. So there's no breakout room. We are together all the time in Zoom. That's fine. We'll adapt to that. So, okay, the experiment goes as follows. I wrote it also in the Google document. Now you take next to your computer, you take an empty blank piece of paper. It's very important that there are no lines on it. There are no designs. It's just an empty blank piece of paper. Maybe you have to look for it. I'll give you a minute. Try to find an empty paper. Or can make breakout rooms. That's great. Thank you. It would be nice, yes, just for 5 minutes to exchange in small groups of 3. Is that possible? Everybody has a piece of paper? All right. And now you write with a pencil, just a very physical, old-fashioned pencil. You write on top of your paper the question, what do I see under the line? Okay, so what do I see under the line? Is it empty paper, Emma? Because I saw that there's a lot of drawings on it in Russian or whatever. No, it's okay. It's fine. All right.
You're being
Now
very suspicious, Kristof.
Yeah. Okay. So now, under this question, you draw a line on the length of your paper under the question. So if everything goes well, now you have your question. What do I see under the line? Under this question, there's a big line, and the rest of the paper is empty. All right. So now I give you 2 minutes to write the answer to this question under the line. Ready? Okay. Can I just hear, for example, Alex, what you have been writing? You read it aloud?
You're muted, Alex.
I thought you meant Alexander. Yeah.
Oh, Alexander, I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, which one? I can read mine.
Alex or Alexander? Be so.
So
Okay.
what's on your sheet?
Well, first of all, I was just about to write nothing.
Oh.
Then I thought that would be a contradiction, so I wrote white space.
White space.
Okay.
Who of you doesn't agree that he says there is white space there? Well, I don't agree. You might say it's not just white space, it's white space plus the word white space, no?
Exactly. That's why nothing would have been an obvious contradiction.
Yeah, but this one, you didn't escape contradictions.
Yeah, I know,
You
exactly.
did
Yeah.
See? All right, some other, maybe Irina, could you read what you have been writing?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry, it might sound strange. I put down a lake. Then I thought to be more specific, an empty piece or a piece of paper, an empty piece of paper or a white piece of paper.
So what did you write?
Oh, all 3.
Oh my God. Well, I have some chaotic mind here because
Right,
did
correctly.
you notice
You
that
are
already
absolutely
two
right.
times, Alexander and also Irina didn't answer my question because
Okay,
I was asking them, what did you write down? And they give me the process of their thinking instead. I didn't ask for that. See, this is also one of the competencies I teach students, to answer the question that they get and not to describe a process that I'm not asking for. All right. Okay. So you see, there are different questions, different answers possible here. So now the proposal is to go in breakout rooms of 3 people, 3 participants for only 10 minutes, let's say until 17:30. And you compare what you've been writing down. And my question to you is, I will write it also in the chat, which one of these 3 is the most true of these questions? When you look at it now, which remains true and which is not true? Like, for example, what I did with Alexander was that he says, well, there's the words white paper, and so it's not white paper anymore because there's the words white paper added to the white paper. So you could say now, when you look at it now, it's not true anymore. So which of the 3 is the most true? That's my question. And you try to discuss on the basis of arguments, try to get it out or agree on it together. Is that clear? Maybe we won't need 10 minutes. 7 minutes will be enough, Alexander. 7 minutes in groups of 3.
Kristof,
Yes,
can I ask you to just restate the question you gave us?
Yeah, so I will write it in the chat to be clear. Huh?
yes.
So
No,
the question is,
No, the question before we wrote down something.
so now we go in groups of 3 for 10 minutes, and then we compare our answers. So what did you write down under the line? And my question is now, which of the 3 answers, according to you 3, is the most true still now? Which answer is the most true? Right, looking at it now.
So sorry again.
That's my question.
You asked us this question: what do I see under the line? Then we draw a line. Yep. And then you asked us to write what we see under the line.
No,
Yep.
My instruction was write the answer to this question under the line.
Okay.
So if somebody wrote the answer to this question as a sentence under the line, he might be more right than somebody who wrote nothing. See?
Okay, I'm going to create 5 breakout rooms and randomly assign us to each of them. Okay?
Okay.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Alexander.
Okay.
So
Ready?
only 10 minutes, 17:30. So 18:30 we stop.
Okay. Okay. Agreed. So, okay, let's go. So you need to join rooms. Natalia, you should join the room, do you see? Okay. We have some people who, okay, let me try to. You can now join room 4, Alex.
I didn't know that the breakout rooms keep the chat. That was very nice. Alexander, you're muted if you were saying something to us.
Yeah. People are back, hopefully. Just the facilitator doesn't want to return.
Facilitator got lost.
He's enjoying being in a room
Cyberspace.
with two ladies and refuses to come back.
Cyberspace is very tricky. So somebody get lost somewhere.
We thought, Kristof, that you
All right.
decided not to come back, that you were enjoying being in a room with two ladies so much.
That's true. And I just discovered they are your colleagues. You're lucky, Alexander.
A lot of fun.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, we had a very philosophical problem there also with Irina, because she was stating that she has more ideas than she can handle in her head. So that's strange, because it's something metaphysical there happening. Well, so some first reactions. Who wants to give a first reaction to this exercise? Do you like it or not? Do you think it's horrible or not?
Yeah.
Yes. Maybe Natalia?
Mm,
You want to give? Oh, you said hello. So this means okay.
yeah, the task was strange for me after discussion,
Yeah.
because just to write an obvious things seems to me very strange, just to see a sheet of paper with written word, just an answer.
Yeah.
No fantasy, just to write what you see. It's
Yes, it's very concrete, huh?
for me.
Because, well, it's very important to have this. If you do it with students, the writing down is a very essential part. So you don't allow students to explain what they would have been writing down. That's the whole issue, that you have to put material or not. Huh? You put some material things on this paper or not. Some students refuse. They don't write anything because they say, well, if I write, it changes my answer. So I won't do this. That's the whole point. And then you discuss results. Second issue. Okay, sorry, please. Second issue, of course, the meta part. Maybe you got into this as well in the breakout rooms, that we get into something like how do we define together what is more true? Because the question is, what is the most true answer now to the question, what is under the line? How can we define this? So immediately, spontaneously, they come into this meta move, because it's a difficult issue. You don't have to impose it. It's a spontaneous move that they get into this meta thing. And that's what I like about the exercise as well.
Kristof, I'm sorry,
terminate the exercise.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
We had two hands. Would we like to listen to people?
Yes, please, yes.
First we had another Natalia, because we
Yeah.
seem to have two Natalias, and then we had Alex. So
Yes, please, Alex, yes.
Yeah, I like the activity, but my question is, I'm sure you're going somewhere else with it, and you've kind of alluded to that it's to do with the meta thing of what is truth or closer to truth or not. Am I right there?
Yes, of course. Well, we'll do it right now, because I wanted to make one step more to see how it serves to go on with it. This is actually the start of a philosophical dialogue or discussion as a kind of stimulus.
Yeah,
that you could
that's what
use
I thought. Yeah, great, thanks.
So the next step would be to write down in the Google document, and then we stop because we don't have much more time. But what kind of question does this evoke in your mind? When you look back at the exercise, try to formulate a question you have about this exercise in the document. So under the part C in session 2, when you go to the Google document, what question do you have now about on the basis of the exercise? And it should be a question that is not direct to information. So not a question like, would it be possible to do this exercise also on carbon or something? That's a technical question, it's not an interesting one. So it should be a question that you can discuss in a philosophical way, so that there are possible answers, that there are different arguments possible, so that you can go into a dialogue with each other. For example, a question like, what is nothing? Something like that. Huh? Or what do we add to reality when we speak? I had a question of a student starting from this exercise, and this question was, is it better to shut up? That was a very good one. So no technical questions. Try to find a question about the theme that you encounter when you were doing the exercise. I would add, while we are listing questions, there's an additional exercise. If you have a question about or starting from one of the questions of the colleagues, you write it under this question. So if you read the question of some of the others, and you think, well, if I read this question, I have another question, you write it under the question in another color, for example, in blue or in red. All right. While we're doing this job, just I interrupt. to say, what does this bring to us? You know, when you do this with students or together with the other colleagues here, listing these questions, what does it bring?
Okay, I think that it brings thinking. So it's when we speak about this metacognition, and it gives, I think, the areas for further discussions. No?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I noticed as well, Irina, that you spontaneously come to a few metacognition questions. How do we define truth? Are the levels of truth? Why compare our answers? I found that also interesting. It's something that a lot of students ask. Why doesn't everyone has a truth of their own? You know, why not leave everybody in peace? Why should you compare arguments at all? It's kind of relativist idea. Other outcomes that you say, well, if you list questions like this after the exercise, what does it bring?
Can I say, Kristof, for instance, I had a discussion in a breakout room with Alexander, and he had one that was better in the sense of his statement was one of degree, where mine, which was white space, was clearly false in the sense of the truth was either white space or not. And so
Exactly, yeah.
you could kind of start classifying different claims to truth.
Exactly. Well, that's if you start this attempt, I give you a few lives to accomplish this. That's what a lot of philosophers have tried to do. And it's a lot of work, but a very interesting one. Yeah, very interesting one. So you could go into a meta level if you, depends a bit on the level of your students, to say, why is this the case that you cannot say in the same time a white paper and a white paper with the words white paper on it? Why is that? It's the non-contradiction issue. So why is that a problem? That's
Also,
of course very advanced.
Yeah, I was also thinking in on your Padlet, one of your competencies, which is to do with kind of sorting out the difference between claim and evidence for the claim. And this is a good opportunity to start discussions about that. You claim that's more true because this evidence, and you claim that is more or less true.
Yeah.
Evidence. So it allows those thinking steps of
exactly, yes. That's very interesting. Yeah, thank you a lot, Alexander. It's of course, I don't know if you recognize this relativism in what in a lot of participants on dialogues. I don't know if you do these kind of conversations, but it's well, it takes some encouragement to get into a discussion about who's right. You know, it's very fashionable to say, well, everybody's right in his own way. Or everybody has his own truth, see? And then, well, that my question when the student asks me, so, or said to me, everybody has his own truth, I say, well, so that means that your statement, your claim, everybody has his own truth, is your own truth. So that means that in the same classroom, somebody can say the truth exists, and that's also true. So how do you explain that? And that's, of course, the paradox of relativism, that everything's relative except for the statement that everything's relative.
Yes. We were talking about different criteria, that sometimes some statements are of objective nature and others are of subjective nature. So objective statements can be true or untrue, whereas subjective statements, like one of us says, I see opportunity, somebody else says, I see curiosity. These things cannot be true or untrue unless you're lying, right?
Yes, exactly. That's very nice, Anna. Thank you. Here for the competencies of the philosophical conversation leaders, the capacity is to distinguish claims that have to do with subjective announcements. For example, I like spaghetti. You're not going to into the discussion if you say somebody says I like spaghetti, somebody's nice for you or bad for you. But if you claim something that is the case or not the case, it's true or not true. For example, this is a white paper or this is a paper full of words. It cannot be both at the same time. And that's what I would call an assertion or a claim. And to distinguish a spontaneous subjective announcements from an assertion that is right or wrong. That is one of the biggest competencies. It's a very difficult one.
Yeah, great.
There are a lot of conversations in daily life in pubs where you don't go into discussion because it's just an announcement of somebody said, I was on holiday, it was very nice, we had nice weather, I took a lot of clothes, all my children were there, it was fun. What do we have to say about all this? You accept and you say, well, nice for you, good for you. But if somebody says, you should never go on holiday because it's bad for you, that's something else, you know. Then you have something to discuss, and we need arguments.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, now we get into this. Are there any comments? Do you see a link between what we were doing and this list of competencies? If not, do you want to say something about this list that we didn't address yet? That would be interesting to exchange. That was a bit of topic as well.
I think that one of my comments about the list, I think I wrote it on the Padlet, was that depending on the objective, so depending on the purpose for a list of thinking competencies, will come up with a number of different lists.
Yeah.
So, and to me, yours seem to be specifically aimed at having a conversation. Yes, having a Socratic conversation. So, and this is a specific objective, and then probably we could discuss your competencies in relation to that objective. But if the objective is different, for example, how we can resolve very complex problems, then probably we need another list of competencies.
Yes, yes. Could you give me one example, maybe, Alexander, of a competency that you say, well, this is typical for conversation. It's not about thinking curricula in general, for conversation leaders.
Well, I need to, I don't have a list open now in front of me, but if you could share maybe a list, it would be easier for me.
Could I, sorry.
I think there were three, right? 3 types. So my comment was that the first one felt qualitatively different to me. And I would say that the first one, I don't remember what you called it, was more of the kind of building of the right posture or something. Yeah.
Posture.
Yeah, that, you know, that's more kind of the setting of the stage for a conversation, whereas the second and third felt more like actual, what I would call thinking.
Yeah. You're right, yes. But do you agree, for example, Anna, will be interesting for me to know that sitting still is one of these postures, that this is a big issue here. I don't know, maybe in other countries as well, but in Europe, there are a lot of programs for early school children and also for primary school children for attention learning, you know, because their attention is distorted. They have to learn to restore attention, to sit still. And that means to be able to concentrate for 50 minutes, half an hour. Do you agree that it's important, first of all, and that you need extra exercises?
Absolutely. So I think that the question is, so when we have a framework, is it all encompassing, or are there sort of parts that are necessary conditions for a framework versus part of the framework itself? Do you know what I mean? I mean, again, I think I said it might be like splitting hairs, and I really don't want to get into it, but that was just my first impression.
So what would be your impulse? Because what I'm doing is, it's a very interesting one, because you have programs, for example, of Frédéric Lenoir in France, where they do 10 minutes before they start doing philosophical dialogue with children. They do 10 minutes of meditation, you know, this kind of mindfulness training and so on. I don't do it because an exercise like you did now asks attention from the beginning. So there's no attention training needed before you start the exercise. You need all your attention, otherwise you cannot do your exercise. So we need a kind of curriculum with exercises that need a total focus, otherwise you cannot do it. That would be my point of view. I don't know if you agree, if you need separate attention exercises or not.
Kristof, can I come in? I wrote this on your Padlet because I'm familiar with the Philosophy for Children program, who use the 4 C's, you know, care and collaboration and critical and creative. I'm looking at some of your things. I think that they're really good, that they operationalize what it means to care. You know, you have the idea of authentic and showing interest. And clearly the just sitting still and listening and the taking turns. So I particularly, but were you influenced by you're obviously familiar with philosophy for children, it's kind of worldwide. I found it interesting because they're kind of broad goals they have, but you've made them very, very concrete in that sense, you know, what it means to show authentic involvement.
Well, yeah, that's a problematic word, of course. What does authentic involvement means? It's not measurable. So I wanted to make it more measurable. For example, also listening, also just the verb as listening is very vague. I would say listening means that you are able to repeat literally what another one has said.
Yeah.
If you summarize, don't listen enough, you just you give your way or your view on what the other one has said.
Yeah.
So just the ability to repeat literally is better, more concrete, I would say.
Because
so authentic, being authentic to me, yeah, I left it out, I think. I don't know if it's still there.
no,
I don't
it's
think
still
so.
in there, yeah.
It could be.
It's in your
it's still in there. It's still in there. Okay.
To adopt an
Okay,
posture, but you give it instance, and that's what I liked. Is as a teacher of philosophy and theory of knowledge, I taught in the International Baccalaureate, that this is a really good guidance of what kind of behaviors to model and what to expect. That was for me a very strong concept of your idea.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. Yes, thank you so much, Alexander. Yes, you know, I think maybe one thing I can lift out of these competencies that have to do with this listening and this posture is what I could call a cognitive empathy. So it's the ability to imagine what it means for somebody else to have this experience. See, and there's something else than feeling what the other feels. That's what you could call it emotional empathy. But cognitive empathy is really a task of the mind. So it's not the summary of somebody who has lived something. It's the ability to find words for the experience, a particular experience of somebody else. So I don't know, it's an interesting question I would like to ask you. Do you think it's a cognitive competence? Do you add it as well in your curriculum? Because it's something that I would see is very valuable for civic education, that you're able in, for example, in a society, to be able to imagine what your neighbor, somebody from a totally different background, from a totally different thinking system, might be able to experience or might experience instead of you. It's and Martha Nussbaum has written about it, for example, that it's a very big, important competence for citizens. But I think it's purely cognitive. It's a very difficult thinking exercise. So I do it very literally in classes when I, for example, ask students to describe the death of a mass murderer, for example, of a pedophile, or somebody who's in the war. And mostly when they will react to it, so they will not be able to describe the daily life of somebody else who is like that, because they have to overcome emotions of hatred or not being able to associate or to connect with somebody like that. But if you have enough competence of imagination, I think you are able to imagine the daily life of a pedophile or whatever, who are part of our society. You'd say it's a part of they are also citizens. Do you like that idea or this competence or not?
Can I add something there? This is Anna, who has the Padlet about competencies in mathematics and uses the OECD idea where basically knowledge, skills, and values come together. What you've just said about cognitive empathy, and the idea you mentioned, Nussbaum, the idea of seeing the capabilities you have and the capabilities others have, and some of them are unfair and accidental, that is a major competence. To be able to understand someone comes from there because of what they can or cannot do or have not. I think that's a very powerful. That's the first time I've ever heard that idea of cognitive empathy.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's but in the capabilities framework, I think that's really
But it's something else than seeing the capabilities of somebody else. It's to be able to imagine what it is to be and to experience life through the eyes of somebody else.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question, if you don't mind. I know that we don't have very much time. We started out this discussion, I don't know if you were a part of it, Kristof, or not at that time, about domain general and domain specific thinking. And so I'm kind of in my mind circling back to that and just wondering, so from what I understand, you actually teach this approach as a class, right? I don't know what you call it, I'm sorry. But I guess let me just formulate my question. So my question would be, would you envision, for those of us that are more sort of traditional academic subject specialists, what would you envision as the level of reasonable integration of this kind of framework into our work? So that is more domain specific, whereas a lot of the thinking skills obviously are domain general. So just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, but I have a question back. Do you have any educational tasks, or is it just research you're doing, Anna?
No, of course, yes, education.
Educational tasks, okay. Because of course you can deal with this theoretically, which is very important as well. But of course it changes a lot when you have, well, it's adapted, I would say this way, this list, by the years of experience I have as a facilitator, just like Anne Pilgrim, who is present with us, also has years of experience of this. So it's established a bit through the experience of having all these difficult groups and classes and so on. Right? So I think both need each other. You have to go through the critical thinking curriculum, where you find a lot of nice things, but you can also add a lot of things from the experience and delete a lot of things from theory that I would say would not be that easy.
So for instance,
example,
like,
something that, just give you one example, is that a lot of you have been written on metacognition. I'm very interested in this because I see the usefulness of it a lot. But the practice of having metacognition in schools or in student groups is very poor, at least in Belgium. And that's, of course, Western Europe country, highly developed country. So, for example, there's no, I think a lot of students have ideas about how to teach what they have in schools or in universities in a better way. But there's no teacher who asks for it. That would be metacognition, no? How to teach the lesson that we get here from this professor in a better way than we have it from her or from him. And a lot of students have ideas about this. That's what they're telling when they come home, but it's not rewarded in the classroom. I would say it's very interesting to have their ideas about how to teach this lesson better also on the table. And that's something that's very interesting to see. How does metacognition, which is a very important and a very advanced skill, I would say, fit into the practice of an institute, which is mostly or a lot of times authority-based. They don't allow metacognition. They think it's important, but they don't allow it.
Kristof, can I jump in just asking us all how we would like to continue, because we've reached the end of our second hour.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
There are probably some questions we would like to ask. I have a question myself, but I'm looking at the time as well. So would we like to take some more time and then discuss a little bit more, or would we like to pause here and go back to our document and add some ideas there? And maybe continue some of the things, I don't know, via the board or in a different way, or formulate them as input for reflection on Wednesday, where we can obviously speak about this approach as one of the approaches to developing thinking skills and see to what extent it is different. I think it's in a way connected to Anna's question, the way I understand it. Yeah. So one thing is when you do it as a separate subject, which is probably your case, Kristof. And another thing is when we speak about embedding it or parts of it into a different discipline, and whether you think this is a good way to go and how it can be approached, etc. But there are probably some other questions. So just to sum up, yes, do we want to spend a few more minutes, or would we like to stop here?
My suggestion would be to go to the document to write some comments on like we did with the previous part.
Okay, good.
Because I also have to,
yeah. So then let's take a few minutes before we call it a day, just to go to the document and maybe add some of our ideas so that we can keep them and summarize them till tomorrow. Hey, colleagues, let me thank you once again for your contribution. So you can obviously continue adding ideas to the document. I think we'll try to start tomorrow by having some kind of reflection. I do want to remind you that we are open to your ideas and suggestions on how we can improve the approach to organizing tomorrow to make it more meaningful for all of us. So your feedback is welcome, either in the document or in any other format. So, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing these discussions tomorrow when we have a probably more specific level and can discuss the same things, but already at the level of specific disciplines, and share both the experience and the ideas of how it can be done. So thank you very much again and have a fruitful evening. Those of you who are in the second part of the day.
Thank you, Alexander. See you tomorrow.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.